A lot of reaction to that. I'm joined now by Sean Spicer, Communications Director for the Republican National Committee. Thank you, Sean, for taking the time. It's good to see you.
You bet. Thanks, Ronan.
So Sean, you took to Twitter very swiftly and slammed Elizabeth's comments. You said it's not appropriate, and I should get out right off the bat. Obviously, that's the reaction we had around here to that diatribe. It seems totally inappropriate to single out young people who aren't in the political game themselves, and particularly to politicize it. But all of that said, was it right that she lose her job over this?
Look, I don't know, but I think that it's unbelievably poor judgment. And as you said, I mean, I think children should be off limits, especially the first daughters. I cannot imagine the stress that those two young ladies are under every day. And frankly, we have no idea the conversations that occur before or after an event like this with their parents. But they should not be brought into the political discourse because of the job that their father ran for and was elected to. So I think that the comments were inappropriate, insensitive. I think sometimes it's a question of within a workplace, was it one case of bad judgment, or is this a pattern of something? So it's not for me to judge whether she kept her job or not, but I do think that it should be strongly condemned. It was. She clearly apologized for us, which was appropriate. So that's where I think it stands.
There's, of course, a long history of brutal comments about first children. It seems to me on both sides of the aisle. Rush Limbaugh, of course, calling Chelsea Clinton a dog, famously on his show when she was just 13 years old. Limbaugh also has a track record of this, and particularly called Amy Carter, you may recall, the most unattractive presidential daughter in the history of this country. And on the other side, there was a lot of painful criticism of my colleague Jenna Bush when photos of her drinking emerged at college. Are these kinds of comments ever appropriate, Sean?
No. I mean, if the people who are dragged into this process, and by that I mean spouses and family members, they really should be off limits. They to have a life, like, and grow up or live their life independently of that. And to the extent that they're brought into these processes, especially in an office like being president or vice president, where you're brought into the spotlight in a way that no one else is, I think it's a very, very tough life to then have to live. And so to the extent that they don't do anything public, meaning that it's, you know, they break a law or do something like that, then they shouldn't be touched. That being said, Ronan, I will say, and I know you cited some of the examples of the other first family, and I think for me, though, that this issue is much broader, which is, look, there's no question that the comments that this individual congressional staffer made were highly out of bounds. That being said, I've been in this job for 4 years, and I've been doing this for about 20 years. A Republican mid-level staffer does something out of bounds, and it becomes a national issue that gets played over on television. It's the third story on the Today Show. And when actual elected officials of Democrat side do something, it gets brushed aside. So I do think there's no excusing it.
Because, you know, I think when we look at that reaction to, say, the Bush girls and that instance of their drinking in those photos, there was an equal furor about that. And some of the, I think, inappropriate criticism they got.
But when people went after, for example, but when people went after the Bush twins at that time, whether it was Jenna Bush sticking her tongue out or some of the other instances, there was no one in the media bringing people on, sort of defending them. In fact, it was most of you guys in the media going after them, playing those clips. In fact, in the case of this particular instance, it was Gawker who first went after the two Obama girls for their behavior. So I think that the media is a little bit culpable in this whole situation. And I think, frankly, there's a double standard when it comes to how they treat a Republican that screws up and how they treat a Democrat that screws up. But I will tell you, time and time again, when you see a Democrat cross the line, say inappropriate things, or a liberal, for gosh sakes, I mean, Chris Matthews crosses the line probably every night, and
look,
no one
just
thinks
Sean,
anything of it or calls him out.
That fact pattern that we talked about now. These examples on both sides, I think I agree with you, it's a much larger problem, but your illustration tells me very clearly it's not right, it's not left. Gawker is part of the problem, in this case potentially. Mainstream media outlets in general, I have to say, my perception is have a policy where there's an ironclad rule you can't beat up on first children, but in any case where they would violate that, that's part of the problem. This seems to be across the board to me, and I think it gets so much coverage, Sean, based on my own conversations in this newsroom about why it struck a nerve with people, because they see that it could be their own children. They relate to it.
Well, and I get that, and I think right now you're limiting the discussion to first children, and I do think that you're right with respect to just looking at that subset, that there's equal bashing on both sides is equally inappropriate. But I also think that the reality is that this is not a high-level person that leveled these inappropriate comments. This is someone who took to their own Facebook page, who is frankly just a mid-level staffer across the street on Capitol Hill. Again, not excusing it, but the idea that some individual who throws something out on Facebook suddenly rises to the extent of national news is a little ridiculous. This is not a prominent person or someone in the public dialogue or an elected official who's making these comments that have an impact. I mean, up until today, no one knew who this young woman was.
When you see a personal opinion expressed like this, totally acceptable to say it's inappropriate, as people have across the board, but a much more contentious thing to say that person should lose their job, that person should essentially shut up. This is a tough issue. I really appreciate your coming in to help unpack some of the party reaction to it and your own personal reaction. Thanks, Sean.